In one sentence, we enable every organization on the planet to take massive amounts of data and do predictions on that data. So I'm using technology called machine learning, predicting based on that data patterns that they can then use to improve their organization, to improve their business. So that's what we do in short.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Handelsblatt Disrupt, dem Podcast über neue Ideen, Disruption und die Zukunft der digitalen Welt. Mein Name ist Stephan Scheuer, ich bin Korrespondent für das Handelsblatt im Silicon Valley und vertrete heute unseren Chefredakteur Sebastian Mattes. Und deswegen begrüße ich Sie ganz herzlich aus meinem Büro hier in San Francisco. Die meisten werden es schon gehört haben. Daten sind das neue Gold. Aber was nützt es, wenn man auf einem Berg voll Gold sitzt und nichts damit anzufangen weiß? Eine Antwort darauf, zumindest wenn es um Daten geht, hat der CEO und Mitgründer von Databricks, Ali Ghodsi. Databricks ist aktuell eines der wertvollsten Startups der USA. Es wird mit 38 Milliarden Dollar bewertet. Ein Börsengang soll noch in diesem Jahr stattfinden und könnte die Bewertung auf 100 Milliarden Dollar steigen lassen. Es wäre damit der größte Börsengang der Tech-Branche in diesem Jahr. Der Grund? Databricks ist eine offene, cloud-basierte Plattform und nutzt künstliche Intelligenz und Machine Learning. Damit können rund 7000 Unternehmen weltweit die richtigen Schlüsse aus den riesigen Datenbergen ziehen, die sie alle sammeln, aber oft eben nicht richtig oder nicht effizient auswerten können. Zu den Partnern gehören Cloud-Riesen wie Amazon und Google, zu den Kunden Unternehmen von Bayer bis BP, von Uber bis H&M. Wodurch zum Beispiel unterscheiden sich die Bedürfnisse der Kunden von H&M in den 64 kulturell unterschiedlichsten Ländern? Wann kaufen Kunden welche Kollektionen? Wann sind die besten Zeiten für Angebote? Databricks-Chef Ali Ghodsi glaubt, die Analyse von Daten ist die nächste Revolution im Cloud-Geschäft. Er ist überzeugt, dass die Vereinfachung der effektiven Nutzung von KI und Daten es allen Unternehmen, egal wie klein oder groß, möglich machen kann, ihre Daten besser zu nutzen. Was davon reine PR ist und warum Ali Ghodsi glaubt, dass KI irgendwann Teil von allem sein wird, das habe ich den geborenen Iraner, der mit 5 Jahren mit seinen Eltern nach Schweden geflohen war und in Schweden und Berkeley studiert hat, beim Spaziergang hier im Silicon Valley gefragt. Und natürlich haben wir auch darüber gesprochen, wie sich der Ukraine-Krieg auf die Tech-Branche auswirkt. Und damit zu Ali Ghodsi, CEO und Co-Gründer von Databricks und Miterfinder der Analytics Engine Apache Spark.
Hi, Ali.
Hi.
Hi. Ali, so first of all, one topic that keeps the entire tech industry really busy these days is what's going on in Ukraine. So just give us an update. What is Databricks doing with regard to Ukraine? You don't have big clients in Russia and you don't have an office either in Ukraine or in Russia, correct?
Yeah, so, from a customer base and from an employee base, we didn't have too much business or customers that are affected in Ukraine or in Russia. We do have a lot of employees who have a background either of those two countries, and they're of course deeply affected by this. It's a stressful situation. So we've made sure that at least we can support the employees that we have that are affected by this. We've also stopped doing business with any companies in Russia. We're not doing any new business. We're turning off our sort of even pay go services there. And of course, our hearts and minds go out to those affected by this horrible war. It's devastating for everyone involved, and our employees too. And not just the employees that are directly affected; everybody else is wondering too. So definitely, it's top of mind for everyone.
So what is your take on how could this change or impact the entire tech industry? As we have never seen anything like that, where tech companies are normally the ones pushing for globalization, for connecting people. And now there is almost everybody from the European or from the North American side pulling out of Russia. So how is this going to change the overall tech landscape?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's like, we have to abide by the regulations of the countries that we operate in. So, when there are sanctions, we have to immediately implement those. So that's just the law. So we are doing that, obviously. But secondly, it's most tech companies don't have huge amount of business in Russia, or at least speaking for ourselves. But I think it's similar also in other parts. So I don't know how much it's going to affect the business itself. I think it will have more impact on the macroeconomic landscape, which then affects all the businesses. because, this puts pressure on, energy prices, which then makes the markets more turbulent, which then, worries everybody even more. So, that is, I was at the, KeyBank conference, which is an investor conference today. And it's like top of mind for every investor. So everybody's thinking about this right now. And they're worried, what is it going to macroeconomically also mean, especially since inflation is high? What's it going to mean, going further out if this continues? For Databricks, I can just say, being private, it helps us quite a bit because, we don't need to worry too much about the inflation situation or the stock market or so on. We can focus on building our business. But of course, everybody's affected by war like this.
You mentioned that you're private, but you're private now. You've had plans to go public several times already. You've made announcement that you could go public this year. So what is the current situation? Do you still want to have your IPO this year?
We didn't say that we want to IPO this year. We didn't give any timelines. We're actually not allowed to give any timelines. The way it works, is you don't want to set expectations because, people make financial plans based on that. So that could get you actually into trouble if you ever did something like that. But to be honest with you, my view is that we're in a very, very early days of a huge market. This machine learning, AI, data science market, war, not war, slowdown of the economy, inflation, all those things. It's going to have such a massive impact, the technology, on everything that we do over the next decade or two. I think we're just in the early phases. So we're taking a really long-term view on all these things. And being private lets us just invest in the business and focus on building a great company and not worry too much about what the stock price happens to be right now today. In terms of like IPO, we will IPO. We're largely ready in terms of our financials and our metrics. And so technically we could go public, today if we wanted. But we're not in an extreme hurry. And it's also not a particularly exciting market to go public in either. But that's not actually affecting the decision, to be honest with you. We're really focused on the long term here.
As probably not all of our listeners know what Databricks is actually doing, even though that you have quite a significant customer base in Europe and in Germany as well. Could you maybe just explain for somebody who has never heard about Databricks what you actually do?
Yeah, in one sentence, we enable every organization on the planet to take massive amounts of data and do predictions on that data. So I'm using technology called machine learning, predicting based on that data patterns that they can then use to improve their organization, to improve their business. So that's what we do in short. The little bit longer story is that if you look at companies like Twitter or Facebook or Uber, they leveraged machine learning everywhere in the organization, in every part of their business. You wouldn't be using Google today if it wasn't for the machine learning that they had. You'd be using AltaVista. Twitter, you wouldn't read those tweet feeds, if they weren't customized and personalized to you. Uber tells you the price of the ride, figures out, recommendations for food, puts more people in the car, estimated time of arrival. All these use cases are machine learning use cases. But these companies, everyone knows they use AI. What about the rest of the millions of organizations out there? They have massive amounts of data that they have collected, but they are not doing all these amazing use cases that I just talked to you about. Our mission is to democratize data, analytics, and AI to all those other organizations around the world and help them move into the future the same way Google did, the same way Twitter did, the same way Facebook did. And there's lots of progress happened there just in the last year or two and lots of momentum in the market. So that's the mission that we're on. And that's what I mean. We're in the early phases of that. We joke internally and say we're on day zero of that. So over the next 10, 20 years, lots will happen. All companies on the planet will look like this. So our hypothesis is, Mark Andreessen in 2011 said, software is eating the world. He meant that software is everywhere now. It's in your thermostat, Nest, it's in your, Apple Watch, it's in your Tesla car. And, it's every company today is a software company. Well, similarly, that software now has interactions with the environment and it's collecting data. We believe AI is going to eat all of software. So wherever you have software, you're going to have AI use that. So every company in 10 years will be an AI company. And we want to lead that revolution and that democratization. So that's what we do.
So you've talked about already big tech companies and how they're using technologies such as big data, making use of large numbers of data. But your customer base goes far beyond that. For example, in Germany, you have H&M, a fashion company, you have Siemens and others. So could you take us a little bit through how how companies that are not traditionally tech companies are using Databricks?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take a Siemens or if you take a Thyssen-Krupp, which is an elevator company, they have lots of equipment. All that equipment today has sensors attached to it. It collects data. They push that to what we call the data lakehouse, which is our technology. And I'm happy to talk more about that. And then they do machine learning on that. And one of the use cases that enables them to improve their business is to look at, when is this going to fail, this technology? This piece of equipment I have, can you predict what's the likelihood that it fails within 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, next week? And if that prediction is high enough, you can actually save significant costs by going and replacing it proactively. And you can avoid, accidents, and it's just better for the environment. So it's a very common use case for the industry. Any company that has lots of equipment, those companies also have sensors attached to that equipment. The sensors are cheap. The sensors collect lots of data. You can get these kind of insights. How often should you service that equipment? And when does it need servicing or inspection? That is also something that the machine learning algorithm can help you figure out. If you're H&M, you're a clothing company. Your use cases are different. Your use cases are, what should I recommend to you? Just like Facebook and Google know, what's tweet or what, picture you will like looking at. Similarly, a clothing company like H&M can actually figure out what kind of clothes would you like to see and what would be likely something that, would interest you. So it's called the propensity model. Also, a company like H&M can use massive amounts of data they have to predict each SKU that they have, forecast what the revenue sales is going to be in different departments by different items and products, all using machine learning on the Databricks data lakehouse. So the use cases are vast, and they apply to essentially every industry, every vertical, every organization, big and small.
When it comes to making use of large amounts of data scale, especially when developing projects in products, makes a huge difference. So looking at the cloud industry, we have 3 big companies dominating the field. So how is it possible that you, as well as some others, are actually in this field where there are such big players that could basically just try to also get into your market? So how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's great, actually. Great question. When we started, all our business was on AWS, Amazon Web Services. But what has happened in the last 5 years is that Microsoft, Azure, has thrown in the hat in the ring, and as well Google, GCP. All 3 vendors, they have essentially infinite capital coming from other sources. All the retail revenue in the planet, all the ad revenue on the planet, all the Office and Windows revenue on the planet. So as a result, they've been able to compete very fiercely with each other. And that really helps us because the market, you don't see that any of these companies are going to replace the other ones. It's not the case that AWS will kill the other 2 clouds because they were first, or GCP because they have some AI technology is going to replace all the other 2, or that Azure, because of its enterprise relationship, is going to replace the others. So we see that over 80% of our customers have a multi-cloud strategy. They want to be on 2 clouds or more in our surveys. And every year that percentage increases. And for them, it's really important that they can actually make the software stack that they're building work on all the clouds. So that's really the secular trend that we're seeing. And that's the thing that helps Databricks business. They know that if they use Databricks, they could switch cloud. They could make it work on multiple clouds. It's always the same software. It's a huge investment to build this kind of AI data stack internally at any organization. Like, there's a big difference between an old organization doing that and Facebook doing that. They don't have the skills and so on. So if you're going to do all of that, you want to be able to reuse it on other clouds, not having to do it again and again or do it 3 times on 3 different clouds. So that's really what's helping our business. And that's a big change. And that's where you're seeing the growth starting to accelerate a few years ago when there started to be 3 of them. And in terms of competing with us, we're sort of like a killer app for them. Right now, they are focused on winning all the data. So they're saying, give me all your data. and move to my cloud, and then we can take care of the rest later. Because they know if they don't win the customer's data right now, there is no later for them. So right now, that's the number one focus on them. Get every customer's data into the cloud. So in some sense, we're a killer app. We're saying, hey, we drive massive amounts of data. We launch 10 million virtual machines. So Databricks launches 10 million machines every day in the cloud. So we're one of the biggest customers that you could have for these cloud vendors. And we have great partnership for that reason, because we're a big customer that drives a lot of storage and compute for them. In the future, I'm sure they'll want to move higher up in the stack. But right now, partnership is going great because, we drive that consumption to them.
So why shouldn't AWS, Azure, or Google just come and buy you so they would just own the killer app?
Well, one reason actually not to do it is that a good portion of the revenue is on the other clouds. So if you buy a company and a good chunk of the revenue is on other clouds, what are you going to do with it? You don't want to throw it away and you don't want to keep it. So in some sense, I think the world is better off having these multi-cloud vendors. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see more and more companies like Databricks, like MongoDB, like Okta being on multiple clouds. And that's good for customers because they get choice underneath those vendors. They can use any cloud that they like. That's how I think this is going to evolve. If they have to buy every company that is on top multi-cloud, they'll have to buy a lot of companies because, on top of storage and compute and networking, there are just so many different applications. So they would have to go ahead and buy every one of those. So I'm not sure that's a feasible option. I think they're actually better off being infrastructure cloud providers. I think that's a huge market. I think they can easily together, combined, drive $500 billion of revenue. And that's a great, amazing market. Owning all of the IT infrastructure on the planet in the cloud is, I think, a great business. But there needs to be more on top of it. There's software on top of that infrastructure. And I think there's going to be place for lots of vendors like Databricks.
As you mentioned, a lot of space also for other vendors. There is one of your competitors that's already listed. I'm talking about Snowflake. After going public, there was a lot of excitement in the entire industry. But recently, they've come under a lot of pressure. Expectations by Wall Street have not necessarily been met. Growth rates are down. So how do you look at this? How could you avoid a similar fate as Snowflake is looking at the moment?
Well, first of all, I want to say Snowflake is a great data warehouse, and the revenue is still growing at very impressive rates. And it's still a phenomenal business. Maybe it was priced to perfection. And, there was a wrinkle in the perfection that someone saw. And, and that, shocked people. But I think it's a great business. But I think fundamentally, the two companies are different in the sense that there are a lot of similarities, but we're fundamentally also different because we focus much more on the predictive technologies, predicting the future. So the difference between Snowflake and Databricks is Snowflake primarily focuses on the data warehousing market. And that's a big $15 billion market. And they can go to all those businesses, Teradata, Oracle, and so on, and say, hey, you have all this on-prem data warehouse. We can make it much cheaper and faster in the cloud with the cloud data warehouse. That's great. That's a lift and shift. Databricks is different. Databricks saying you can also use this data to start to predict the future. And that can have fundamental impact on your top line, bottom line in a very strategic way. But it's not a lift and shift. It's not just we run a POC, we can do it for a third of the price of Oracle and we're done. So I think Databricks has much longer pathway. I think we can go on for decades. I think this market is going to be eventually absolutely massive, and it's going to affect every business on the planet. But we are in the early days. Whereas I think for Snowflake, it's more lift and shift. Cloud data warehouse from on-prem to cloud data warehouse in the cloud. So I think fundamentally the two companies are different in their sort of at their fundamentals. Now, we launched also a data warehouse in November 2020. So we now also have a data warehousing offering since November 2020, and we GA'd it. So it's generally available December. So 3-4 months ago, we GA'd it. But that's a nascent business for us. It's less than, it's single-digit percentage of our revenue, but it's growing very fast. So, of course, that then means that Databricks and Snowflake will overlap more and more in the future. But I do think fundamentally we're coming at it from different angles, and we basically have two different sales motions, two different users, use cases, personas. And for this reason, we coexist in most accounts. So in most customers, we coexist with them. There's a huge overlap.
A lot of our listeners are based in Europe. Many of them are either scientists, or they work in business, or they work for governments. And as you have this European as well as North American angle, first of all, I wanted to ask you, you studied in Sweden, but then you basically made the switch to go to Berkeley. Why did you do that? Why didn't you just follow the path in Sweden with your PhD with computer science studies?
Yeah, look, I think there are many advantages to Europe, and there are advantages to the United States. If you want to, I think UC Berkeley is very close to the industry, Silicon Valley tech here. And I think the kind of interplay between industry and Silicon Valley and the universities, in particular Stanford and Berkeley, really creates this sort of very fertile environment where you can actually focus on research problems that are very close to industry, and you can have more impact. So that was why I moved here. So it's like this kind of Schumpeter kind of, research industry sort of cycle, that feedback that's great here. But then on the other hand, Europe was fantastic for me. I basically huge investment in IT and tech. I as a sixth grade kid, I picked, when everybody picked languages to study, I could have studied French or Spanish. They offered me, and this is a long time ago, C++ and Java as languages to study. So as a kid, I got to learn programming, in school officially, and huge investments in broadband and so on. So like the Scandinavian model of investing heavily in IT and giving it to the whole population was fantastic. Not to mention subsidizing a PhD, I don't have to take any loan or anything, you're covered by that. So I'm hugely indebted to that. Without that, I wouldn't be where I am today. I also think European market is interesting because, of the way it's regulating how you can use data with GDPR and so on. And I think that's first of all, I think it's great for the data market because I think we need good regulation of how data is handled. I think that's good for the industry. And I actually, therefore, have focused Databricks on leveraging our own technology to improve, for instance, GDPR. So for instance, this Delta technology that we built can be used to help organizations become GDPR compliant. We can track the lineage of the data, and you can submit the DSR saying, I want to know what data you have about me, and I want to delete my data, and we can actually help them do that. So we have huge business in Europe, and actually we're starting an R&D center now in Berlin, in Germany, and we're going to actually invest we already have a few people there. We're going to invest in 10xing it this year. So huge investment in the engineering team in Berlin. There was also an acquisition of 8080 Labs that we did, which is a Berlin-based company. So we have a lot of roots in Europe. We also have a big R&D department in Amsterdam. And, it has hundreds of engineers in Amsterdam that are working on our core technologies. So Europe is an important market for us, both to do business with and also developing our software and getting the engineering, a lot of the talent that comes out of the universities there. So it's an important part of Databricks.
But you're actually conquering Europe from Silicon Valley. So you as basically being educated in Sweden, as you praised the Swedish educational system, why isn't there a big Databricks in Sweden? Or just look at the broader perspective, why aren't there important cloud companies in entire Europe?
Well, the cloud companies I can't speak to, but I can say that there's a lot of interesting technology companies in Europe. In Sweden, my home country, there's lots of Spotify came out of there, there's Klarna, there's gaming companies, like King and so on. So there is lots of, it's a small country, right? With 9 million population. I think they're actually doing great. So I think the different countries focus on different things, but I think Sweden has actually a really good booming tech sector. So I think that's great. And Databricks actually has a big presence in Scandinavia with over, I think, 30 people working in Sweden alone. So it is an important market for us. But, as a business, when you look at it, the US TAM, the total addressable market in the US is just so big, that it makes sense to start there. And they're very hungry to embrace technology and buy technology. So it's a good place to start. But Europe is a very important market for us, and it's a big portion of our business today, actually, a very, very significant portion of our business. So we spend a lot of our energy and time growing that part of the business.
So what do you make of the Gaia X plans in Europe, as this is also supposed to be a starting point also for having a multi-vendor strategy, for making use of a lot of data science tools that you are also looking at? So is this a good idea to do it with a government initiative, or is it a bad idea?
Sorry, I don't know what that is.
Sorry, you have not heard about Gaia X?
Nope.
Okay, that also says a lot. That says a lot. Okay, it's probably better. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective, it was a European initiative to foster basically a European answer to big cloud companies, and it should be an open industry standard. But anyway, honestly, it tells a story that you don't know. So this thing basically,
I'm looking at it. Actually, I'm looking it up right now as we're speaking. Gaia X. I have maybe heard of it, like in the passing, but it's not something that comes up, with our customers or in our. It's not. We don't hear the demand, and we would hear it immediately. So if it was like a really important requirement that we need to be on the Gaia X cloud instead of on the, say, American clouds or something like that, we would have heard it. We don't see that, so not yet, but it could be the early days. So you never know. We will go wherever our customers will go, right? So, like for instance, in Asia, lots of our customers demanded Alibaba, and we added support for that. So we will go wherever the customers want to go.
Right. As many of our listeners are also either founders or thinking about founding companies themselves, are there maybe hints, things that you would say, okay, that was an interesting learning. This is something that I should have known before starting Databricks?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you that the Databricks story, the way it evolved was, we were researchers and we wanted to change the world. We wanted to democratize this kind of machine learning technology to all organizations. And we fought really hard to do that from academia. And I think one of the biggest lessons that we learned was that there's only so much you can do from academia. You can sit there and you can publish research papers and you can tell the world, hey, this is how they do things. But nobody's going to really pick that up and embrace it and really understand what that is and go have that impact on the world. So the first lesson was, if you have a really great idea in academia and you really want to have worldwide impact with it, you should start a business and you should do it yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two was that once we started doing that, we realized that most organizations and enterprises are much further behind than we thought. Most companies are not Facebook, Google, Twitter. So they have historical baggage, they have org charts that are different, and they have compliance and regulation and so on. So really making sure that they can use the technology. So it's not just about the ideas and solving the problems, but it's also making sure that it fits the existing enterprises, those that have been around 50, 60 years. That's the key thing. So focusing on really solving their problem. That was a big, eye-opening moment for us, realizing that we have to do that. Once you have the product market fit, there comes the part where you have to scale your business and expand, and you start expanding internationally. And the importance of that and the people that you hire cannot be overstated. When we started our Europe business, it's basically the same thing as starting the company all over again. You're hiring your first people in Europe, and they're going to set the culture. So we got really lucky, and we hired our general manager, Dave Wyatt, in UK, and he was amazing because he had done this once before in another company. But that every time you go to a new market, it's like starting the company all over again. You have to pay attention to it, and it's going to go through the same journey again. So those are the lessons. And then, the final years here for us is once you get to a certain scale, we're now over 3,000 employees. We've raised over $3 billion of funding. And at scale, it becomes much more about optimizing things. So first phase is just finding the product market fit and making sure that people can actually get value out of your technology. Second phase was expanding in all these different markets and starting your company in all these countries. It's basically restarting all over again, many, many times over. And then the final phase is now you have to start optimizing. and you have to make sure where can you get synergies. And any small inefficiencies in the business that you can tolerate in the early days, they become huge when you're 3,000 people. They can bring the company down to a grinding halt. So then it really becomes about optimizing the business across the countries, across the different product lines, across the different departments. A lot of it becomes about optimization. So I didn't know these things before they happened. So, and my MBA did not prepare me for this. So those are the lessons I learned.
So where do you see most room for optimization now?
At Databricks?
Yes.
Look, I think that, so our data lakehouse platform. So lakehouse is something that enables you to combine all of our different products into one platform. It's a simplification across all of our products that we have, across the different personas. Because, many people work with data in an organization. There are those people that are business analysts. They like to work in dashboards. There are the people that are data engineers. They're moving the data around and making sure that the data is secure and robust. Then there are those that are data scientists. Those are the ones that use statistics and do predictions. Making sure that we can actually make sure that they have synergy across the platform, all these different pieces in one platform. That's the most important part. We're doing that in the product, but also in how we sell the product and how we make people use it. We call that the lakehouse, which is a portmanteau of data lakes, which is primarily focused on AI, and warehouses, which are primarily focused on business analysts. We're combining all of those, all of the data that you already have, that you're doing data engineering in your data lake. So a lot of optimization just across the different product line, the different personas. But also, as a business, you have to hire a lot of people that, are just focused on bringing efficiency into the business everywhere. So just the number of operational staff that you hire in every department is, I think pretty shocking if I did not know that when I started the company, when we were 6 people or 7 people at UC Berkeley. Lots of people with Excel sheets.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting story to follow on how Databricks is going to be doing. And we will definitely have a look how it goes with your IPO plans.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Und damit sind wir auch schon wieder am Ende von Handelsblatt Disrupt. Wie immer freuen wir uns über Kommentare. Schreiben Sie uns gerne eine E-Mail oder wie gewohnt an die Handelsblatt LinkedIn-Gruppe. Die Details finden Sie in den Shownotes. Dank an dieser Stelle auch für die Unterstützung von Regina Körner und Migo Fecke von Professional Podcasts, dem Dienstleister für Strategieberatung und Podcastproduktion. Wenn Sie gerne jederzeit Zugang auf alle Artikel des Handelsblatts haben und auch alle Podcasts hören möchten, dann auch von mir der Hinweis auf unser Disrupt-Vorteilsangebot. Schauen Sie doch mal unter handelsblatt.com/Mehrwirtschaft. Und auch dazu gibt es die Details in den Shownotes. In der nächsten Woche wird Sebastian Mattes dann wieder für Sie da sein. Bis dahin wünsche ich Ihnen, ganz im Sinne von Disrupt, interessante digitale und auch analoge Zeiten. Ihr Stephan Scheuer.